Subtitling by Zweites Deutsches Fernsehen. 2001-2026, its year, 4-day, 331, since the full-scale invasion began. Welcome to the Daily Situation Report. In today's report, Ukraine is split in its campaign against Russian reconnaissance and air defense in Crimea. There's an ammunition depot explosion, and Russia continues to make territorial gains. Meanwhile, vulnerabilities in logistics, command, protection, and more are increasing. First, let's check PET's daily update from Ukraine. You can see where he is now, and here are the anti-drone nets. The reason for that is because he misjudged the situation and actually ended up really close to the front line, in a pretty dangerous area. The reason for this is that global positioning system often fails, especially during attacks when it gets turned off. This also means navigation is harder when traveling alone, so a wrong turn can easily send you the wrong way. He'll probably comment on it himself soon and, as usual, give a brief report. I usually discuss today's events by starting at the map's north and moving clockwise around the front. Today I need to do it differently because the topic is important. Yesterday we looked at how the Ukrainians were able to destroy several air defense systems and also 1 or 2 radars. The attacks were carried out from the air by drones and were quite successful. I narrowed this down further and marked it on the map. The attacks that happened yesterday took place in the area between Sevastopol and Feodosia, basically in the green-marked area. So that you can get a better sense of the map, I have reorganized Crimea so that we always know where the places are that I'm talking about. Here in the west is the yellow-dotted area, which is a zone I've decided to call Bermuda for now. Why Bermuda? Are the Russians basically blind? For a long time, they controlled 2 old drilling platforms here, which they converted into radar stations. But they lost control of them a few years ago. That means they're gone. Drones rarely fly here and ships hardly ever enter now. The Black Sea Fleet has suffered such heavy losses here that they've withdrawn most of their ships from Crimea. Since then, they sail only near the coast, staying under the protection of other forces. Helicopters are rarely used here. I mentioned that 3 or 4 weeks ago because flying through this area has become dangerous. And a few months ago, another fighter jet was shot down here. Why don't helicopters fly through here anymore? Well, because they risk being attacked by Ukrainian sea drones, since there are so many of them here. This is also the typical approach route for Ukrainian sea drones, and they are quite present in this area. Some drones have been equipped with R-73 anti-aircraft missile launchers, allowing them to target aircraft and making them a serious threat to airplanes and especially helicopters. A good part of the area is also covered by Neptune anti-ship missiles. Do you remember the Moskva, Russia's flagship of the Black Sea Fleet? It was also sunk in this area by 2 Neptune missile hits. In recent years, Ukrainians have destroyed many radar installations in western Crimea's blue area, which were meant to cover Bermuda. This is the area here. The Ukrainians have landed very often in this area here, mainly with special forces using speedboats. They crossed over, landed here, launched drones from here, and were then able to destroy air defense systems here. They had to do it that way back then because at that time the Ukrainians didn't have the drone range that they have today. Back then it wasn't possible to launch a drone from the Odessa area that could reach all the way back there, a regular drone. We're talking about a kamikaze drone, just a standard kamikaze drone. Their battery lasts about 10 to 15 minutes depending on the weather conditions. That's definitely not enough to get from Ukrainian territory to Crimea, find a target, and still be able to attack it. That's why they had to physically approach the location, then launch a drone near the anti-aircraft gun, and then exfiltrate again. So that was very dangerous and of course also very costly. Nowadays, you can place sea drones in the area that serve as repeaters, meaning they amplify the signal. You can fly around in the area with other drones like these mothership drones, which are also used to relay the signal. We can attack with fiber optic drones. Fiber optic drones can reach up to 40 or even now 60 or 70 kilometers by unrolling their fiber optic spool and then they have a perfect image. Of course, what could be a bit difficult here, if I may, I'm just looking straight across the 184 kilometers from here. So it's quite difficult, but we still saw it. There are the Sea Baby drones, which also carry small drones with them. That means you take a sea drone somewhere near Crimea, and from there you launch the smaller first-person view drones. They are then able to attack targets here. That's roughly how the last attack happened. As I said, everything has developed a bit further, and the Ukrainians were able to destroy quite a few guns here, and many radar systems have made this area increasingly blind, because in the blue area they had to do without important components since they were destroyed. So are the Russians more or less blind when it comes to rapid reconnaissance? Of course, they also have satellites in the area, but satellites. With those, you have to wait until they're back in that position and can take a usable picture. That means there's a delay between satellite flyovers, and that time can be used for attacks. After Bermuda fell to Ukrainian forces, they launched numerous attacks in western Crimea. These are now moving deeper into the green area, especially in southern Crimea. By the way, this is also where the Black Sea Fleet headquarters is located, which has already been attacked by Storm Shadow cruise missiles. And there's also an extremely long mountain range here that stretches all the way through the area. And right in this area, there's also a larger concentration of anti-aircraft guns, and especially radar installations, which are mainly used for the early detection of incoming cruise missiles and rockets. This is where Ukrainians are striking more often now. Why? Why focus on this area? Why target a few guns in Crimea instead of the front in Ukraine? It's simple. Some reporters assume that they want to attack Crimea. Zelensky and Syrskyi, we heard it a few days ago, said they want to. You need to be more offensive. Staying only defensive won't win a war. And now some reporters, including some German reporters, who have a much wider reach than I do, assume that the Ukrainians want to attack Crimea, and with soldiers, hand on heart. I'll be completely honest with you, that's absolutely not possible. You would need an extremely large number of landing ships for that, which the Ukrainians don't have, to be able to supply properly here as well, which makes it very difficult. And also to bring a lot of soldiers and equipment to Crimea, which, as I said, is more or less impossible without a large fleet. The Russians can defend the island just as well. The corridors have to be kept open to supply the soldiers. How do you plan to do that without a navy and with troops who are physically cut off from supplies? They need an extreme amount of logistics, a lot of support, and also many vehicles. After all, you can't win the fight with infantry alone. And how are you supposed to get all of that to Crimea? We once had a bridgehead here in the Kherson area, here at Krinky, as you can see here. That was just a very, very small landing. It's only about 1 kilometer at most between the two riverbanks here. The bridgehead held out for a very long time, but it was hardly supplied at all. And when it was supplied, at the 3 locations, including back here, it was always just a few speedboats that managed to avoid the drone threat. And this here was already very, very difficult. So how would you manage to pull off something similar here in Crimea? Now, of course, you could ask, why would they land over the water? You could also just break through somewhere here again and then simply reach Crimea over land. Well then, southern Ukraine has been extremely mined since 2023. And they will certainly attack again at the same spot where they failed almost 3 years ago, namely here in the area of their counteroffensive. The only other alternative would be to cross somewhere here in the Kherson area and then attack here. The big advantage of this area is that the Russians have units here that, in quotation marks, are no longer useful for the front. The Russians use Kherson as the area where they can only station units for, let's say, light defense. While other units continue fighting at the front, a unit at the front gets worn down so much that it can hardly fight anymore. Then it goes to Kherson, where it stays for months and is repeatedly re-equipped. And in the meantime, they defend a stretch of coastline that hardly needs to be defended at all, because the Ukrainians almost never cross here. There are hardly any bridges left, so how are the Ukrainians supposed to get across here without bridges. Building pontoon bridges here will lead to immediate Russian attacks. As I mentioned, there's only a few meters difference between the sides, and it will still be extremely difficult. We saw the same with the last bridgeheads, establishing them, holding positions for a long time, or even expanding further. For that reason, I don't think they will try to physically attack Crimea here. What could likely happen, and what I think, is it will probably go like this. I've mentioned this in previous reports. So first, the Ukrainians gained control over Wermuda here. Then the Ukrainians started destroying anti-aircraft guns here and covering territory here. Now they are in the process of doing the same thing right here at other radar installations and at other anti-aircraft positions that are located very high up. And then at some point, some will be attacked here as well. What the Ukrainians are doing is pushing the Russian air defense capabilities further and further east. That means at first they were here with regular soldiers and had to attack. Then they managed to get drones there. Now they are also managing to attack down here in the south with drones. So they are probably around the island, attacked from below to avoid being detected because of the mountain range. Then they were also able to gradually gain control here as well. And we will see if the density of Russian air defense capabilities here keeps decreasing. Then at some point we will see even larger drone attacks here. And eventually there will also be planes that dare to enter this area. And that's the crucial point as soon as planes are able to fly along here. So many anti-aircraft guns and radars have been destroyed here that it is now, in quotes, somewhat safer. Then the Ukrainians will most likely try to launch cruise missiles over Crimea, which will then hit the rear area of the Russian troops here, and specifically along the front line or at important points. The Russian air defense along the front has already been thinned out for a long time, so they can no longer cover every direction. That's perfect for the Ukrainians, of course, if they can attack from behind to hit high-value targets. And I think that's the direction things will continue to develop. Because that way, on the one hand, they can say they want to carry out more offensives, and on the other hand, they can support these offensives even more. Overnight, Russia launched another major air attack on Ukraine using drones, Iskander ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles. Strikes were reported from Kiev, Dnipro, Odessa, and Poltava, among other places. In Kiev, there were particularly severe consequences on the left bank of the Dnipro River. Electricity, water, and heating were lost in over 6,000 buildings, and a woman was injured. In the Bucha district, where the massacre took place a few years ago, a man lost his life as a result of the attacks. The Ukrainian Air Force reported that 40 enemy drones were shot down, indicating another high but not complete interception rate. Special significance is also given to confirming that Russia used a new Iskander missile variant for the first time. This refers to the Iskander missile E, which has a range of up to 1,000 kilometers. The deployment of the system indicates a further expansion of Russian capabilities in the area of precise long-range attacks and increases the pressure on Ukrainian air defenses as well as on targets far behind the front lines. There are consistent reports from occupied Debaltseve about an attack on an ammunition depot. After the initial impact, there was another explosion. Local sources report ongoing fires and frequent, sometimes intense explosions over a long period. This suggests that the attack directly hit a large weapons or ammunition depot, and a significant portion of the stored stockpiles detonated uncontrollably. The situation indicates severe damage to Russian logistics in this area and a temporary or complete shutdown of the affected depot. This is a field ammunition depot which keeps the extent locally limited, but it is still a heavy blow to the logistics of the surrounding units. The Russians tend to prefer building one large ammunition depot instead of many small ones. Troops have apparently introduced a new form of camouflage. Soldiers are now supposed to disguise themselves as piles of garbage or rubble. The idea is aimed at not standing out or avoiding reconnaissance in destroyed or littered combat areas. I have to say it looks pretty good. You can hardly see the soldiers underneath. And now just imagine this man with his camouflage in a half-collapsed house, blending in with the rubble. So, honestly, that's really not bad. I couldn't hide that video, but let's focus on rubble for now. A Russian soldier is also filming Volodya, a city in southeast Ukraine captured last year after 2.5 years of fighting. He also shows the graves of the civilians who died here and says that these people died, but this choice of words obscures the reality. Civilians didn't just die. They were killed by the war caused by Russia. His post is quite typical of a common pattern. Destruction and civilian casualties are shown, but the responsibility for them is ignored or blurred in language. He himself says he finds the whole situation here creepy, but why things are the way they are is, of course, not mentioned. In July 2024, Russia launched the Pokrovsk offensive. The goal was to control the city, which is strategically important for transportation, to enforce Russian ambitions like full control of Donbass and more. In December, Russia claimed the city was fully captured, but this was denied, as with Kupiansk, since it wasn't true. But if we take a look at the map now, we can see that by the end of January 2026, the city is considered more or less under Russian control. I wouldn't be able to find any place in the city now that I haven't already marked as Russian dominated. Since today's report, I've also roughly colored the place name here, the locality's name day. I just noticed that in southern Murnorath it's completely missing. Alright, so this part here, Murnorath North. As I said, I assume it's under Russian control, but I can't prove it. This part here is definitely under Russian control. A few isolated skirmishes remain in the north, but not enough to say Ukrainians are holding positions here. From here, as I said, attacks are often launched towards Raishine, which will probably be the next village to see heavy fighting. And that's it again from the front. Thanks to all subscribers, channel members, and the Algo crew, especially Lieutenant Colonel Renica, Robert Ziller, Dietrich, Freddie, and Mehrhofer. Please subscribe, like, comment, and see you in the next report.